The trees had no leaves. The air stank of cordite and rot, and the ground, once rolling hills, was now a moonscape of craters, corpses, and rusting barbed wire. Verdun was no battlefield. It was a graveyard waiting to be filled. The year was 1916. The Western Front had been locked in stalemate for nearly 2 years. Trench lines stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss Alps. Men lived like rats, mud-caked, lice-ridden, waiting for orders that never seemed to change. But Germany had a plan. Verdun was a small French town with little strategic value, but the forts around it, massive concrete fortresses like Douaumont and Vaux, were symbols of French pride. The German High Command believed the French would defend Verdun at all costs, so they decided to bleed them dry. "Bleed the French white," said General von Falkenhayn. On February 21st, the German army unleashed a storm. 1 million shells fell in the first 9 hours. The sky turned black, trees shattered like glass, trenches disintegrated. Men died without warning, blown apart mid-step, their bodies never found. And then came the infantry. Wearing gas masks and steel helmets, German stormtroopers advanced through the smoke. They moved fast. Within days, they had taken the outer defenses. Then Fort Douaumont fell, captured by a small squad of Germans who found it nearly abandoned. The French were stunned, but they didn't retreat. They couldn't. This was the moment the soul of France was tested, not by a single battle, but by the idea of Verdun, a place they couldn't surrender, a symbol they couldn't afford to lose. Reinforcements poured in. French General Philippe Pétain took command and issued a simple order. Ils ne passeront pas, they shall not pass. The French counterattacked. Then the Germans attacked again, and again, and again. Months passed, seasons changed, but the shelling never stopped. Fort Vaux fell after weeks of savage fighting, French troops holding out in pitch-black tunnels, drinking water from the walls, eating rats, coughing up blood. When they surrendered, the German officer saluted their courage. Above ground, the battlefield transformed into hell. Shells churned up bodies from previous assaults, rats fed on corpses. Rain filled the craters with mud and blood. Soldiers drowned in the earth itself. Some men went mad, laughing and screaming, unable to speak. Others just stopped moving. This was the middle of the story, the moment when men no longer fought for victory, but simply to survive the hour. The noise was constant. The air burned with chemicals. Even the wounded screamed for silence as shells exploded closer and closer. The color of everything turned to ash. Gray skies, gray faces, gray uniforms. By the summer, nearly every French regiment had passed through Verdun. They called it the meat grinder. Troops were rotated constantly. Those who survived left with 1,000-yard stares and bleeding lungs. In October, Fort Douaumont was retaken by French forces. They pushed the Germans back, inch by inch. By December, the offensive ended. Verdun was still in French hands. The line had held, but it had come at a staggering price. Over 300,000 dead, more than 700,000 wounded or missing, all for a patch of land smaller than Manhattan. Verdun wasn't just a battle, it was a ritual of sacrifice, a national crucible. The French bled for every inch, and even in victory, there was only mourning. The town was destroyed, the fields poisoned, and beneath the quiet forests that grew back in the years that followed, 10 million unexploded shells still slumber beneath the soil. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.